I've scoured the internet and found 10 prison creepypastas that will for sure turn you into a law-abiding citizen. The monsters that are in these stories will for sure give you nightmares. If not you guys, they're for sure gonna give me nightmares tonight. How's it going, YouTube? I'm Landon Dowlatsingh. I'm your host for this one. We really hope you enjoy what we do here, these top 10 videos. We really put in a lot of work, and if you guys like our videos, don't forget to smash the subscribe button and also hit the like button as well. And also in the comment section, let us know what top 10 video you guys would like us to make next. Maybe it's an urban legends, maybe it's a top 10 of your country, I don't know. Alright, so let's not waste any more time here. Let's jump right into this list. This is the top 10 scary prison creepypastas. Starting things off in at number 10, we have Prisoner 959. Let me set the scene for you guys. Okay, imagine a very dark, cold prison where all of the worst criminals are locked up behind bars. This prison barely has any rules, the guards are corrupted, and the prisoners would constantly start riots. The cells are even darker, and the feeling of the entire prison would make you think that this place was hell on earth. In the deepest part of the prison, there was one strange cell that nobody had been in except for a few high-ranked officials. One day a massive riot broke out, and a security guard tried to save his own life. He found the key to the airy cell and he opened it. As he was feeling around, he stumbled upon a large cylinder with a peephole. Once he looked inside, he saw a pair of eyes. One was a discolored white as if he were blind, and the other was blood red. The prison guard found a file in the cell that said Prisoner 959. In that file, there were pictures of bodies that had been impaled through the mouth and out the coccyx. The bodies were full of blood and they didn't have any skin. The prison guards heard the inmates quickly approaching his cell, so he made a very tough call. He decided to free Prisoner 959 in the hopes that he would kill anything and everything in his way so that he can escape. And sure enough, Prisoner 959 brutally murdered almost everybody in cold blood, and once the riot was over, he was nowhere to be found. So he could be anywhere lurking in the dark, waiting for his next victim. Boulder City Prison rolls onto this list at number 9. So the sky was full of gloomy clouds and rain began to fall as Dixon Rhodes, the warden of Boulder City Penitentiary, drove towards his prison. As he approached the gates, he noticed that a new guard was stationed at the entrance, but he managed to open up the gate to the prison without any difficulties. The warden made it further into the prison and he noticed the blood splatter on the wall. He turned to another guard and asked him if there was a riot. The guard nodded his head and said yes, but everything is fine now. The guard opened the prison door with the keys and locked it behind the warden. As he made his way through, the room was dark, which was unacceptable, especially after a riot. A guard stepped beside the warden and began to escort him to the office, but suddenly they heard screams of pain and horror beside them. As the warden turned his head, he saw the guard who usually escorts him was locked behind the cell, and those new security guards were actually the prisoners seeking revenge on the warden. Number 8 brings us to the new fish. Technically this one is a Reddit no sleep story, but I had to include this in this video. You've all heard the term new fish, right? It's basically what inmates call the new set of prisoners that are coming straight into the penitentiary for the first time. But there was something off with this one new fish. As soon as he stepped into the prison property, the old convicts went wild because he was a good looking kid. The guards thought it would be best to put him in protective program because they knew that his life was in danger. But one of the high profile convicts had a lot of connections and called in for a favor. The next day the new fish was transferred into a cell, and that's when all hell broke loose. You could hear agonizing screams echoing in the whole prison, and some even say that they can hear the sound of flesh being torn and the sound of bones crushing. The next morning the guards inspected the cell and they were actually shocked to discover that the high profile con man was dead. His face was ripped off and all you can see is his organs everywhere and his bones and his skeleton. So somewhere within those prison walls there's a thing that has an insatiable hunger, and he definitely should never be messed with. Next up, number 7, we have prison numbers. A 27-year-old man was sentenced to spend 5 years behind bars at a new prison facility somewhere in the desert. This wasn't your typical prison. The place looked like it was brand new and barely lived in. The cells were massive, and some of them could even hold up to 10 or even 25 prisoners. Each prisoner was given a number and they were assigned to certain cell blocks. This one prisoner was given the number 5 from cell block D. Once he was locked locked up in his cell, he began to evaluate his other cellmates. Inmate 6 was friendly, but inmate 7 was the complete opposite. He was sketchy and he had some pretty strange habits, and inmate 9 was as normal as anyone could be. But one night, the sketchy inmate 7 followed number 9 into a dark abandoned corridor, and this was during free time. Inmate 6 came running towards the man screaming, "He's crazy." Inmate 5 was a pretty curious man, so he decided to turn the corner to investigate. What he saw was mortifying. Inmate 9 was laying down, there was blood everywhere, and sketchy inmate 7 looked up and there was blood on everything. It was on his hands and his mouth. Then it hit him. He now understood why inmate 6 was afraid of 7. And that's because 7, 8, 9. I'm not sure whether this creepypasta was scary or just cringy, but you guys be the judge. I'm thinking it's cringy. I hate that joke. I've been getting letters from the St. Louis prison creepypasta, and this takes us into number 6. A very tall man with broad shoulders knocked on the door and passed the homeowner a letter that was stamped from the St. Louis Correctional Facility. The man thought to himself, I don't know anyone who is from that prison, but he went on to open the letter. On the envelope it said, "Please allow the courier to be present to witness the reading of this letter." As the man began to read it, he was thrown off by the horrific details. The person who wrote this said that they are serving a life sentence in prison for brutally murdering his family. He said his mind is being controlled by a demonic and sinister voice that has been telling him to murder them. And then he spit on the judge and tried to kill everyone in the courtroom. The letter talks about how he crushed his 2 young children's heads, and he did it with his bare hands, and how he strangled his wife to death. On the next day, the same courier came again with another letter. This time, it was a drawing of a woman who was being tortured. On the third day, another letter came from the same courier, but this letter was different. The last lines read, "The demon has grown bored with me being locked up like this. He told me how to end my curse. You make someone else pick up the demon's curse the same old way I did, by inviting him into your home 3 times." The man reading the letter just froze in shock, and he looked up at the courier. His eyes were endless black, and he had a cruel grin on his face. The Russian sleep experiment comes in at number 5. Alright guys, prepare yourselves, brace yourselves for this creepypasta / urban legend, because it is pretty graphic and brutal. Let me take you guys back to the 1940s, where Russian researchers wanted to conduct an experiment to see what the effects were if you deprived yourself of sleep. Due to ethical reasons, they didn't want to pick any volunteers off the street, so they decided to force 5 prisoners to participate in this experiment. Yeah, like that's so ethical. The prisons were given an experimental gas that would prevent them from sleeping. Their conversations were recorded and monitored through video cameras and a 2-way mirror. For the first few days, everything was fine and the prisoners were behaving normally. But on the 5th day, that's when things got really bad. The prisoners became paranoid and started whispering about each other in the microphones. Eventually, the prisoners were running around screaming and almost breaking their own vocal cords. On the 15th day, the experimenters decided to put in fresh air instead of the harmful gas, but that actually just made things worse. One prisoner died and the others severely mutilated their bodies. They tore off their flesh, ripped out their abdomen and muscles. When the researchers came to remove them from the room, the prisoners, well, they actually refused, and they wanted to be locked up forever. Eventually, all of the prisoners were shot and killed because they wanted to cover up this highly unethical experiment. An empty prison is at number 4. At the Pembina prison, there were 5 floors and it had the capacity to hold 500 inmates. One inmate was sentenced to spend 365 days at this prison. Little did he know he may not make it out alive. The prisoners would talk to each other quietly between the cells and loudly between each floor. But during one night, the prisoners on the first floor were violently screaming in pain throughout the entire night. As the sun rose, all of the guards were gone and all of the prisoners were locked in their cells without getting any food, water, or exercise. So this lasted for several days, and as each day passed, another floor of prisoners would start screaming in pain and then stop. On day 364, the only floor that was left standing was the 5th floor. The prisoner had one hellish night left in the prison, but as it turns out, the thing or monster that was eating away at the prison was going to get him. Number 3, prison is hell. If you have any form of OCD, then this creepypasta will send chills down your spine. According to the story, a man with a mild form of OCD has been captured for brutally slaying 20 people. He chose to murder 20 people because it's a nice even number. After his 19th kill, he had an obsessive urge and desire to take someone's last breath. So when his his 20th kill came around, he became sloppy. After he brutally attacked a woman on the side of the road with a lead pipe, the police managed to track him down and arrest him. He kept souvenirs from all of his murders so that the prosecutors were able to link him to all 20 murders. The judge wanted to give him the death penalty, but it was illegal in the state where he was. So the judge sentenced him to 1,001 life sentences because he knew that giving him an odd number of years was equally as bad as a death penalty, if not worse, because it would linger with him for the rest of his life. Why I am no longer a prison guard comes into number 2. A newly graduated student picked up a random job as a corrections officer because the pay was good and they promised flexible hours and also benefits. Even though he had a degree in philosophy, he was desperate for a job. During his first week, he noticed that there was a strange looking inmate that would never socialize, and there was just something off about him. When he asked the other guards who the inmate was, they said, "Oh, that's just Dave, but stay away from him." But curiosity got the best of him. He went to the warden's office to ask about Dave, and the warden even said, "Do you like having a job? Do you like having a face? Then stop asking." Well, that would be enough for me to, leave Dave alone. I don't care who he is anymore. But this young and foolish CEO was desperate to find out some answers. So one day he went to Dave's cell. His cell was a little different from the rest. It had concrete walls and a door with a tiny window on it. The guard decided to go inside, and Dave stood there grinning and laughing like an evil maniac. Then all of a sudden the prison guard woke up attached to an IV with the dry blood all over his body. He actually had no idea what happened to him, but he still wakes up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. His heart is pounding and the feeling that someone is always watching him. So what went on in that cell? Nobody knows. And finally, number 1, why was I released from prison? Creepypasta. An inmate convicted of committing computer fraud was sentenced to 20 years in a maximum security prison. But within just 3 months, his sentence was commuted and he didn't need to be placed on parole or probation. Why? Well, at the prison where he was serving his time, there was a legend about an old Nazi inmate named Old Jim who hung himself in his cell. He was notorious for haunting the prison and anyone who looked inside of his dark, dead eyes, well, they would be mutilated and viciously murdered in their cell the next day. Of course, he thought these were only rumors until one night. The prisoners heard keys jangling up and down the corridor, but there wasn't a prison guard in sight. Suddenly, you can hear screams of extreme pain and footsteps slowly approaching his cell. The inmate closed his eyes and stayed in a paralyzed state until the morning, when the guards were dragging him to solitary confinement. The next day, he pulled into the warden's office and he said, "You survived something that has on more than one occasion killed every last inmate on that block. Someone or something decided that you should live. Who am I going to argue with a higher power?" So he has been released and sworn to keep that night a secret for as long as he is alive. But he can still hear keys rattling, and because of that night, he will never be the same. Well, there you guys have it. You've made it to the end of this video. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys all in the next most amazing top 10 video.